Intelligence officer Drev Kosh had delivered difficult intelligence in his career 17 times, and he had prepared for this particular delivery with more thoroughness than he had brought to any of the previous 16. The preparation was not for the content. The content was the kind of content that prepared itself, confirmed evidence of deliberate, coordinated betrayal of an allied military unit's position to an opposing force, resulting in an engagement that had cost the Allied Unit 7 personnel and should have cost it considerably more. The evidence was complete. It was cross-referenced against 4 independent source records. It was not the kind of evidence that required supplementary preparation. The preparation was for Commander Solis. He had studied her service record. He had reviewed her psychological profile, which the Sol Defense Coordination Fleet's administrative archive maintained for all active senior officers, and which he had accessed under the standard intelligence liaison provision. He had consulted, through the appropriate channels, with 2 officers who had served under her command and who had each described her, in different language, as someone whose first response to significant adverse information was controlled and whose second response was decisive. He had prepared for controlled and decisive. He had categorized the possible responses into 4 types. The first was immediate formal protest through the alliance's diplomatic channel. The second was a direct confrontation with the party responsible. The third was a request to escalate through the Concord's conflict mediation framework. The fourth was cold strategic withdrawal from the joint operational structure pending formal review. He had prepared for all 4. He had not prepared for what she actually said. Commander Yeva Solis was at her command post when Drev arrived, which was where she was most of the time, not because she was a commander who managed from proximity to information, which was one style, but because she was a commander who managed by being present to what was happening around her, which was a different style and produced different results. She was 44 years old. She had been in command of the Tesavar Outer Corridor's human military presence for 3 years, inheriting the posting at a point in the Koreth Compact's ongoing territorial pressure campaign when the posting had been widely characterized, in the Joint Operations Council's internal assessments, as the hardest sustained command position in the corridor. She had not characterized it this way herself. She had characterized it as the position she held and the work it required. She looked up when Drev entered. He set the evidence package on her console. She looked at the package, not at him. The specific quality of her looking was not the looking of someone encountering new information. It was the looking of someone confirming that the information in front of them matches the information they already have. He noticed this. He said, "Commander, this is the confirmed intelligence package on the position disclosure event. The confirmation is complete and cross-referenced across 4 independent." She said, "Which channel did they use?" He stopped. He said, "I'm sorry." She said, "The channel. When Council Member Karan transmitted the position data to the Koreth Advance Unit, which channel was the transmission on?" He looked at her. He said, "Commander, I want to confirm that you've reviewed the cover document before we." She said, "Drev, which channel?" He said, slowly, "The Solvith Diplomatic Secure Channel, the Intertier Protocol, the channel that requires Council member-level authorization to access." She nodded. She said, "That's what I needed confirmed, thank you." He looked at her for a long moment. He said, "Commander." She looked at him. He said, "When did you know?" She looked at the evidence package. She said, 11 days ago. She said it the way she said everything, plainly, without the performance of casualness or the performance of gravity, the specific flat accuracy of someone reporting a fact. She had known for 11 days. This was a fact. She was reporting it. He said, 11 days. She said, "Yes." He said, "The confirmation I'm bringing you took 11 days to compile." She said, "I know. You did it correctly. The cross-referencing on the fourth source was the difficult part. That's the one that took the final 6 days. The first 3 sources were confirmable within 5. He looked at her. She had known what he was compiling, across the 11 days of his compilation, with sufficient precision to know which source had taken 6 days and why. He said, "You've been running your own parallel confirmation." She said, "I've been doing something else." She looked at the window. "The confirmation was your job. You've done it correctly. Thank you for the work." She said thank you in the same even tone she had used for the channel question. He said, "What have you been doing for 11 days?" She looked at him for a moment. She said, "Sit down." He sat down. She said, "I'm going to tell you what I've been doing, because you're the intelligence officer and this belongs in your record and I want the record to be complete. But first I want to tell you something else." He said, "Go ahead." She said, 7 pilots. He said, "Yes." She said, Amara Kwon, James Mensah, Sina Park, Kofi Akampong, Reuben Cross, Grace Osai, and Daniel Yemi. Those are the 7. I want them in your record by name, not by casualty count. Will you confirm that? He looked at her. He said, "Confirmed." She said, "They died in the engagement that the position disclosure produced. The Korath Advance Unit had our coordinates because Council Member Karan transmitted them. They were in the engagement because I put them there. I put them there based on a threat assessment that assumed our position security was intact. The position security was not intact. They died in an engagement they would not have been in if the position had been secure. That is the record." She looked at the window. She said, "I have been carrying those names for 11 days. I will carry them for the rest of my career. I want to make certain they are in every document that comes from this incident, not in a casualty summary but as names." Drev said nothing for a moment. Then he said, "They will be in every document." She said, "Good. Now I will tell you what I've been doing." 11 days earlier, the information had arrived through a source she had been developing for 14 months, an indirect signal from inside the Korath, Compact's Advanced Planning Division, that had taken the form not of a direct disclosure, but of a specific pattern anomaly in the Compact's pre-engagement deployment sequencing. The pattern anomaly was this. The Korath Advance Unit's deployment to the engagement position had been completed 18 minutes before the official engagement authorization was transmitted from the Compact's command division. 18 minutes was the specific, documented advance time required to reach the engagement position from the Korath unit's last confirmed location. The advance unit had departed before the authorization had been issued. 18 minutes. The advance unit had known the engagement was authorized before the authorization existed. She had seen this, and she had sat with it for 4 hours before she had begun to work. The conclusion she had reached in those 4 hours was the one that the intelligence division would spend 11 days confirming. Someone had given the Korath Advance Unit the authorization, the position coordinates, and the engagement timing, and had done so in the 18-minute window before any official authorization existed, which meant the source was not inside the Korath Compact's normal authorization chain. The source was outside it. The source had access to the Sol unit's position data independently of the Korath Compact's intelligence apparatus. The source was an ally. She had not told anyone this conclusion for 4 hours. She had used the 4 hours to build a list. The list contained every party with access to the Sol unit's current position data in the 72 hours preceding the engagement. She had built it from the Alliance's secure communication records, the Joint Operational Briefing Distribution Log, and the access records for the Position Data Package's secure storage system. The list contained 14 entries. She had spent the next 3 days eliminating entries from the list. She had eliminated them not by investigating the individuals. Investigating the individuals would have required resources and personnel, and would have created signals that the source might detect. She had eliminated them by analysis, by cross-referencing each party's known communication patterns, known strategic interests, known access histories, and the specific characteristics of the 18-minute window. By the end of day 3, the list had 3 entries. She had spent day 4 doing something different. On day 4, she had called her signals intelligence specialist, Lieutenant Amara Yemi, who was 27 years old and had been with the unit for 2 years, and who had the specific quality, which Solis had identified in the first month, of someone who understood not just signals analysis but the architecture behind signals, the infrastructure of communication systems, how they worked, where their structural vulnerabilities were, and what the vulnerabilities revealed about the people who used them. She had told Lieutenant Yemi one thing. She had said, "I need to know which of these 3 entities transmitted on the Solvith diplomatic secure channel in the 72 hours before the engagement." She had not told Yemi why. Yemi had looked at the 3 entries on the list. She had said, "The inter-tier protocol, that's council member level access." Solis had said, "Yes." Yemi had said, "You're looking which of these 3 is a council member, or is using council member credentials?" Solis had said, "I'm looking at which of these 3 transmitted on that specific channel in that specific window. Can you answer that question?" Yemi had said, "Yes. It'll take 5 days to do it without creating a detectable query signature." Solis had said, "5 days is correct. Take 6 to be certain." Yemi had taken 6 days. On day 10, Yemi had brought her the answer. One of the 3 entries had transmitted on the Solvith diplomatic secure channels inter-tier protocol during the relevant window. Council member Ves Karan. Solis had thanked Yemi and told her the analysis was complete and should be filed under General Signals Review in the routine operational record, attributed to no specific incident. Yemi had looked at her for a moment. She had said, "Is there anything else?" Solis had said, "Yes. I want you to maintain the analytical methodology you used for this query. Keep it current and available. We may need it again." Yemi had said, "Understood." She had left. Solis had spent day 10 and day 11 building the document. She told Drev about the document at the end of the account of days 1 through 10. She said, "On day 10, when I had the identification confirmed through Yemi's analysis, I began building the accounting." He said, "What accounting?" She said, "Everything." She said it with the specific, flat completeness of someone describing a scope that was larger than the word it was contained in. She said, "Council member Karan transmitted the Sol unit's position coordinates on the Solvith diplomatic secure channels inter-tier protocol in the window before the engagement. That is one fact, but that fact is connected to other facts, and those other facts are connected to others, and the complete accounting of what happened requires all of them." She picked up a physical document from the secondary console beside her primary station. It was 47 pages. She set it on the table between them. She said, "The accounting documents the following: the position disclosure event itself, with the timeline, the channel, the 18-minute advance unit deployment, and the engagement that resulted from it. The 7 names, each one with their service record, their tenure in the unit, and the specific tactical situation they were in at the time of the engagement that the position disclosure produced." She paused. She said, "It also documents the prior pattern." He said, "What prior pattern?" She said, "This was not the first anomaly." She looked at the document. In the 14 months prior to the engagement, there were 4 smaller anomaly events in the joint operational record. Each one was individually explainable. Each one had an alternative explanation that was plausible and that I documented as the primary explanation at the time. She paused. "When I built the accounting for the engagement, I went back to the 4 prior anomalies, and I applied the same analysis I used for the engagement itself. She looked at him directly. She said, all 4 prior anomalies have council member Karan's access signature in the background, not as confirmably as the engagement. The engagement is unambiguous. The prior 4 are evidential, not conclusive, but the pattern across 5 events, including one that is unambiguous, is a different kind of fact than any single event in isolation. Drev looked at the 47 pages. He said, "This is what you've been building for 11 days." She said, "Yes." He said, "Before the confirmation was complete." She said, "I could build the structure before the confirmation because I knew what the confirmation would show. The confirmation fills the final 2 pages of the document. The first 45 pages were built on the evidence I could access independently." He looked at the document for a long time. He said, "Commander, what are you going to do with this?" She said, "File it." He said, "File it." She said, "With the Concord's Joint Alliance Oversight Division, the Solvith Compact's Internal Honors Review Board, and the Joint Operations Council's Intelligence Accountability Committee, simultaneously, through the standard formal submission process, with copies to every allied party in the current joint operational framework." He said, "That's a simultaneous formal filing across 5 institutional bodies." She said, "Yes, with the 7 names on the cover page of every copy, above the title, before anything else." He said, "In the diplomatic channel, the formal protest." She said, "I'm not filing a formal protest." He looked at her. She said, "A formal protest is a declaration. It requires a response. The response creates a process. The process has timelines and procedures and outcomes that are negotiated between the parties. I'm not interested in a negotiated outcome." She looked at the document. "The accounting is not a negotiating position. It is a record. It will exist in 5 institutional archives simultaneously from the moment it is filed. It cannot be recalled, revised, or negotiated away. It is simply there permanently with the 7 names on the front and 47 pages behind them." She was quiet for a moment. She said, "Council member Karan sold our position. 7 people died. He will spend the remainder of his political career inside a document that says exactly what he did and exactly what it cost. He will not be able to move in any direction in the Solvith political system without the document moving with him. He will not be able to speak in any institutional setting where the document has been filed without the document being part of the record. He will not be able to negotiate an outcome because the document is not a claim he can respond to. It is a record he has to live inside." She picked up the document. She said, "That is what the accounting does. Not punishment in the legal sense. The legal process is separate and the accountability committee will initiate it through its own procedures. The accounting is something different. The accounting is the permanent, specific, fully documented truth about what happened, placed in every room he will ever need to enter before he enters it." She set the document back down. She said, "I want you to be the filing officer. Your cross-reference confirmation covers the final 2 pages. With your confirmation attached, the document is complete. Will you file it?" He looked at her. He said, "Yes." She said, "Today." He said, "Today." She said, "And the 7 names go on the cover page of every copy." He said, "The 7 names go on the cover." She said, "Amara Kwon, James Mensah, Sina Park, Kofi Akampong, Reuben Cross, Grace Osai, and Daniel Yemi." He said, "I have them." She said, "Say them back." He looked at her. He understood. He said, "Amara Kwon, James Mensah, Sina Park, Kofi Akampong, Reuben Cross, Grace Os, Daniel Yemi." She said, "Yes, those are the 7 every copy before the title." He asked her, before he left, the question he had been holding since she had said thank you. He said, "The thank you, when I first arrived. What were you thanking me for?" She looked at him. She said, the channel confirmation, the inner-tier protocol. I needed that specific fact in the accounting. I had Yemi's analysis showing that Quran transmitted on the Solvith diplomatic secure channel in the relevant window, but Yemi's analysis was an inference. She could identify the transmission's timing and origin metadata without the full decryption clearance to confirm the specific channel tier. Your confirmation cross-referenced the full decrypted record. She paused. She said, the inner-tier protocol is significant because it narrows the possible access pool. If he had used any other channel, the accounting would have had a broader set of alternative explanations for the transmission. The inner-tier protocol requires council member authorization to access. That fact, confirmed by your decryption record, removes the alternative explanations from the document. She looked at him directly. She said, I have been building this accounting for 11 days. The inner-tier confirmation was the one thing I did not yet have confirmed to the standard the document required. You confirmed it. The document is now complete. I thanked you because the document is complete and you completed it. He was quiet for a long moment. He said, you would have filed it without my confirmation. She said, I would have filed it with a notation that the final confirmation was pending and would be added as a supplementary attachment. The document would have been slightly less complete. It would have served the same function. He said, but you waited. She said, I built the document across 11 days. It was worth waiting 3 more hours for you to arrive so the version I file is complete rather than pending. He said, you've been sitting with this for 11 days, knowing what you know, building the document, not telling anyone. She said, I told Yemi what she needed to know to do her analysis. I told no one else. He said, why? She said, because telling people that an ally had betrayed us before the accounting was complete would have produced responses I couldn't control, diplomatic signals that Quran might have detected, organizational behavior changes that might have indicated to the Korath Compact that we had identified the breach. I needed 11 days of normal operational posture while I built the document. 11 days of not knowing, for everyone around me. She paused. She said, and because the 7 names deserved better than to have their deaths used as the opening statement of a diplomatic crisis, before the record was complete enough to do what the record needed to do. He looked at her. He said, you waited 11 days so the accounting would be complete before anyone acted on the knowledge. She said, I waited 11 days so that the first thing Ves Quran knows about the accounting is that it has already been filed in 5 places simultaneous. Lie and cannot be recalled. I did not want him to have the opportunity to manage the information before it was permanent. He said, you gave him no warning. She said, he gave the Korath Advance Unit 18 minutes of warning. 7 of my pilots did not have 18 minutes. The room was quiet. The document was filed at 1400 hours on a Thursday. Simultaneously, 5 institutional archives, the Concord's Joint Alliance Oversight Division, which acknowledged receipt at 1401 and flagged the filing for senior review at 1402. The Solvith Compact's Internal Honors Review Board, which acknowledged receipt at 1401 and convened an emergency session at 1430. The Joint Operations Council's Intelligence Accountability Committee, which acknowledged receipt at 1401 and immediately initiated a formal review under the Council's Standing Emergency Protocol. The Tesavar Corridor's Allied Command Structure, through the Joint Operations Communication System. The Sol Defense Coordination Fleet's Permanent Record Archive for the historical documentation. 7 names, cover page, every copy. Amara Kwon, James Mensah, Sina Park, Kofi Akampong, Reuben Cross, Grace Osai, Daniel Yemi. Above the title. Before anything else. The accounting's formal title, as Solis had filed it, was Tesavar Outer Corridor Position Disclosure Event, Year 3 of the Korath Compact Border Campaign, Complete record including source identification, prior pattern analysis, and personnel casualty documentation. The title was not the part of the document that people remembered. The part of the document that people remembered was the cover page, and what was on it above the title, and what the 7 names signified about every word that followed. Council member Ves Karan received the notification of simultaneous filing through the Solvith Compact's standard institutional communication system at 14:03. He had 117 minutes between the filing and the emergency convening of the Solvith Compact's Honors Review Board. He spent those 117 minutes attempting to access the accounting document in each of the 5 archives, and discovering, in each case, that the document had been filed under the formal institutional record protocol that prevented modification, withdrawal, or supplementary notation by any party other than the filing officer. The filing officer was Drev Kosh, Intelligence Division, Sol Defense Coordination Fleet. Council member Karan filed a formal objection to the filing process with the Concord's Administrative Review Office at 15:02. The Administrative Review Office acknowledged the objection and noted that the filing had followed the standard formal submission process in all procedural details, and that the objection would be reviewed through the standard administrative review timeline of 90 days. The Honors Review Board convened at 1600. The accounting was on the table. The 7 names were on the cover page. Every document in the session's record cited the accounting by its full title. Drev received the Honors Review Board's notification of convening through the standard liaison channel at 1612, which was 12 minutes after the board had begun its session, and he brought the notification to Commander Solis at 1615. She read it. She said, "Good." He said, "Is there anything else you need from the intelligence office?" She said, "Not today. The document is filed. The process will proceed through the institutional channels." He said, "And Karan?" She said, "Will spend the remainder of his political career inside the document. Every institutional body he needs to appear before has the accounting in its record. Every session in which he participates will have the document as part of the session's background file. He will not be able to speak in any formal context in which the joint operational framework is relevant without the 7 names being part of the record he's speaking into." She paused. She said, "That is the accounting." He said, "It's not the outcome he expected." She said, "No." He said, "What did he expect?" She said, "Rage, formal protest, diplomatic crisis, possibly a direct confrontation. He had prepared for all of those. They give him something to respond to." He said she looked at the window. He had not prepared for a 47-page record filed simultaneously in 5 archives before he knew the accounting existed. He said, "Because a record doesn't give him anything to respond to." She said, "A record simply is." He paused. "I heard someone say that once. I've been thinking about it ever since." He said, "What happens now?" She said, "The institutional processes proceed. The Accountability Committee will take 12 to 18 months. The Honors Review will take slightly less. The Concord Oversight Review will run parallel to both. At the end of the process, there will be a formal determination." He said, "And in the meantime?" She said, "In the meantime, the accounting exists. In the meantime, the 7 NAMs are on the cover page of a document in 5 institutional archives. In the meantime, anyone in the joint operational framework who needs to understand what happened in the outer Tessavar corridor in year 3 can read the complete record." She was quiet. She said, "And in the meantime, I have a unit to command." She turned back to her console. He understood the conversation was complete. He was at the door when she said one more thing. She said, "Drev." He stopped. She said, "The confirmation you brought me today, the inner tier protocol. I want you to know what that gave me. He turned. She said, I have been trying for 2 years to understand whether the anomaly pattern I identified 14 months ago was real or coincidental. I had 4 prior events with alternative explanations. I had a methodology for analyzing them, but not the decryption clearance to confirm the channel at the resolution the accounting required. For 14 months, I have been building a case that was one confirmation away from being complete. She paused. She said, Karan gave me the confirmation when he sold our position. He gave me an event that was unambiguous enough to justify the decryption clearance. He gave me the full record. He handed me the one thing I needed to make the prior 4 events into a pattern rather than a coincidence, because the pattern requires the unambiguous anchor, and the unambiguous anchor is his transmission. She looked at him. She said, he sold 7 of my pilots' lives to the Korath Advance Unit, and in doing so, he completed the accounting that will end his career. He gave me the evidence against him when he used me. She turned back to the console. She said, that is why I said thank you. The Honors Review Board's determination, issued 11 months later, found Council Member Karan in violation of the Solvith Compact's first and second honor provisions, which covered deliberate harm to an ally under formal alliance covenant and deliberate concealment of adverse action against an allied party. The determination carried the maximum formal consequence under the Solvith honor framework, which was the permanent revocation of institutional standing, meaning that Karan could not hold any formal position, advisory role, or representative function in any body operating under Solvith Compact authority. The determination was 41 pages. The accounting was cited on 14 of those pages. The 7 names appeared in the determination's opening statement. The Concord Oversight Division's final report, issued 4 months after the Honors Review, confirmed the accounting's findings and added a recommendation that the Joint Operational Framework's Position Security Protocol be reviewed to address the specific vulnerability the disclosure event had exploited. The recommendation was adopted. The protocol revision was implemented across the joint framework within 8 months. The protocol revision was named for the Tesavar Outer Corridor Position Disclosure Event in the implementation documentation. The Accountability Committee's final determination, issued 14 months after the filing, was the longest of the 3 institutional conclusions. It addressed not only the disclosure event and the prior pattern, but the specific mechanisms by which a party with council member-level access had been able to operate within the joint framework without detection for 14 months, and it produced 12 separate procedural recommendations covering access monitoring, transmission auditing, and anomaly detection across the full framework. The procedural recommendations were adopted across the joint framework over the following 2 years. The accounting was cited in each of the 12 recommendations. The 7 names were on the cover page of every document the Accountability Committee produced. Solis was not present at any of the 3 institutional proceedings. She was in the outer Tesavar corridor, commanding a unit, doing the work the unit required. She received the formal notifications of each determination through the standard command communication channel, and acknowledged each one through the standard acknowledgement process. She filed 1 additional document after the final Accountability Committee determination was issued. The document was 3 pages. It was addressed to the Sol Defense Coordination Fleet's Permanent Record Archive, with a copy to the Joint Operations Council's Official History Division. It was titled, Addendum to the Tesavar Outer Corridor Position Disclosure Event Record, Commander's Personal Notation. The notation read, the institutional proceedings arising from the accounting filed on the date above have concluded with findings that are accurate and complete. I want to add one thing to the permanent record that the institutional proceedings did not address, because the institutional proceedings address institutional consequences, and this notation addresses something different. The 7 pilots whose names appear on the cover page of the accounting were not categories. They were not a casualty count. They were not a data point in a threat assessment or a strategic analysis or an accountability determination. They were Amara Kwan, who had been flying for 11 years and who sang badly on purpose during difficult transit approaches because she said it made the approaches less frightening. They were James Mensah, who had been with the unit for 4 years and who knew, without being told, which members of the unit needed 5 minutes of quiet after a difficult call. They were Sina Park, who was 28 years old and had been planning, at the time of the engagement, to request a posting closer to home when her current term concluded so she could be nearer to her family. They were Kofi Akampong, who asked better questions in the pre-engagement briefing than anyone else in the unit, and who had been told, on the morning of the engagement that killed him, that his latest tactical analysis had been cited favorably in the Joint Operations Council's quarterly review. They were Reuben Cross, who had been in the outer corridor for 6 years and who made better coffee than the unit's food system, and who did this deliberately every morning, because he said there was no reason a difficult posting couldn't have good coffee. They were Grace Osai, who had survived 2 prior difficult engagements, and who had a daughter she sent messages to every Thursday, and who had sent one on the Thursday before the engagement that killed her. They were Daniel Yemi, who was 23 years old and who had been in the unit for 8 months, and who had never been in an engagement before the one that was his last. I am adding this notation to the permanent record because the institutional proceedings produced consequences, and the consequences are appropriate and important. But the accounting was not filed for the consequences. It was filed for the 7. The consequences are what justice looks like from the outside. The notation is what justice looks like from the inside. I want the record to contain both. She signed the notation and filed it. She returned to work. The notification from the Honors Review Board that included a formal communication from the Solvith Compact's presiding council arrived at the Outer Tessavar Command post on a Tuesday morning, 3 months after the final accountability determination. The communication was addressed to Commander Solis personally, from the presiding council's senior member, and it was the kind of communication that commanders received from institutional bodies when the institutional body had something to say that was not covered by the institutional determination. It said, "The Solvith Compact's presiding council has reviewed the full record of the Tessavar Outer Corridor Position Disclosure Event, including the accounting filed by your office, the Honors Review Determination, the Oversight Division's report, and the Accountability Committee's findings. We have reviewed the notation you filed as an addendum to the permanent record. We want to convey to you, through this formal channel, the presiding council's acknowledgement of what the accounting produced and what it was built to produce. We understand that the accounting was not a diplomatic instrument. We understand that it was not a negotiating position or a declaration of crisis. We understand that it was a record, filed in the specific way and to the specific institutions that would make it permanent and complete before any party could respond to it. We also understand, having reviewed the accounting's construction across the 11 days between the disclosure event and the filing, that the accounting was built while you were commanding a unit in an active operational theater, without disclosure to your chain of command, without access to the full decryption clearance the accounting eventually required, and without any assurance that the confirmation you were waiting for would arrive in time to make the filing complete before the information became operationally compromised. We are not in a position to assess whether you made the correct decisions across those 11 days. Those decisions are yours and the record speaks for itself. What we can say is that the accounting you filed has produced 3 institutional determinations, 12 procedural improvements to the Joint Operational Framework, and a permanent record in 5 archives that will be cited in the Joint Framework's doctrine documentation for as long as the framework operates. The 7 names are on the cover page of the accounting. They are also, as of this week, on the cover page of the Joint Operational Framework's revised Position Security Protocol. We wanted you to know that. We also wanted to say something that the formal determinations do not say, which is this. The presiding council understands what it means that one of our own members used his position to cause those 7 deaths. We cannot undo what he did. We can ensure that the accounting is complete. We can ensure that the 7 names are in every document the proceedings produced. We can also say, which we are saying in this communication, that the presiding council is aware of what it cost you to spend 11 days building a record while commanding a unit that did not know what you knew. We are aware of what it cost you to not act immediately, to not declare a crisis, to not confront the betrayal in the way that betrayal is usually confronted. We are aware that you waited for the accounting to be complete, and we are aware of what the waiting required. We do not have a word in our language for that quality. We wanted you to know that we recognized it anyway. Solis read the communication once. Then she set it down and looked at the outer corridor through the command post's viewport, where the stellar geography she had been operating in for 3 years was conducting itself with the specific indifference of space that had no interest in what human beings or Solveth presiding councils said to each other. She thought about Amaraquan singing badly on purpose. She thought about Reuben Cross making good coffee on a difficult posting, because there was no reason not to. She thought about Daniel Yemi at 23 years old, 8 months in an engagement that was his first and his last. She picked up a pen. She wrote on the standard acknowledgement form, received, "Thank you for the communication. The 7 names belong in those documents. I'm glad they're there." She filed the acknowledgement. She made herself coffee, because Reuben Cross had been right that there was no reason a difficult posting couldn't have good coffee, and she had started making it deliberately every morning 3 years ago and intended to continue. She drank the coffee. She went back to work. If this one reached somewhere the others didn't, it's in the 11 days. Not the accounting. The accounting is what the 11 days produced. The 11 days themselves. A commander who knew what she knew for 11 days and did not declare a crisis, did not confront the betrayal, did not act on the knowledge in any way that would have given Ves Karan a moment to prepare. 11 days of normal operational posture while she built a record that would be filed in 5 archives simultaneously before he knew it existed. 11 days of carrying 7 names and the knowledge of why they were names rather than people she was still flying with and building instead of breaking. The accounting was not a weapon. It was a record that simply is, placed in every room he would ever need to enter before he entered it. Not punishment, something more durable than punishment. Something permanent, something with 7 names on the front page of every copy, above the title before anything else, because the 7 deserved to exist somewhere outside the person who was carrying them. She said thank you when the confirmation arrived. She said it because the confirmation completed the record. She said it because Ves Karan, when he sold her pilots' lives to the Korath Advance Unit, handed her the one thing she had been missing for 14 months. She built the accounting with it. The accounting is permanent. The 7 names are permanent. Ves Karan will spend the rest of his career inside both. Stay human.